Dear listeners, I welcome you to my channel. Leave your comments and impressions, I value your opinion. The afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft golden patterns on the living room floor. I was in the middle of folding the laundry, my mind preoccupied with the mundane task, when Mark strolled in, his face wearing that mischievous grin that used to charm me. He threw his keys on the table with a clatter that seemed to echo my irritation. "Hey babe, how's the domestic goddess today?" he teased, sauntering into the kitchen for a drink. "Just the usual," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "You know, saving the world one sock at a time." He chuckled, popping the cap off a beer. "Sounds exhilarating." I smiled weakly, focusing on a particularly stubborn shirt. Silence settled between us, comfortable yet charged with the unspoken words of recent weeks. I felt his gaze on me, heavy with something I couldn't quite decipher. "Actually," he began, leaning against the doorframe, "I had an interesting chat with Jerry today. You remember him, right? From the club?" "Yeah, the loud one." I answered without looking up. "That's the one. He told me something hilarious about his wife. Apparently she caught him." He paused for dramatic effect, a smirk playing on his lips, handling his Johnson. I glanced up, not amused. "And that's funny because—" Mark's smirk widened. "Oh, you'll love this. When she caught him, she said, and I quote, 'Jesus, Jerry, you handle your Johnson worse than your lover does.'" I stopped folding. Something about his tone, the way he relayed the joke, it didn't sit right with me. "That's pretty bold of her," I said, the words tasting sour. "Oh, come on, it's just a joke," he laughed, taking a swig of his beer. I shook my head, trying to refocus on the laundry, but he continued. "Makes you wonder, huh? How would you rate my Johnson handling skills?" The question hung in the air, a provocation I knew was veiled in jest, but stung all the same. "Is that supposed to be funny?" Mark shrugged, the grin never leaving his face. "I mean, I know I'm no expert, but I'd like to think I'm at least better than some hypothetical lover." My heart raced. This was too much. "What you mean by that, Mark?" I snapped. "The laundry forgotten." He rolled his eyes, clearly thinking I was overreacting. "Babe, you're being hysterical. It's a joke." A joke. His words echoed in my mind, a mocking refrain that made my blood boil. Was it really just a joke? Or was there truth laced in his laughter, a hidden confession in his careless quip? "I don't find it funny," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mark sighed, setting his beard down with a thud. "You used to have a sense of humor, you know." "Maybe I did," I retorted, "but I don't find humor in betrayal, even if it's hypothetical." He shook his head, a mix of frustration and disbelief painting his features. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" The doubt gnawed at me, but the hurt was sharper, a visceral response to his words. Or maybe I'm just finally seeing things clearly. Mark watched me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room. The sound of his footsteps a bitter cadence that matched the pounding of my heart. Alone, I stood amidst the chaos of unfolded clothes, the silence oppressive. His joke, whether it meant something more or not, had unearthed a sliver of doubt, a crack in the foundation of our marriage. And as I resumed folding, each crease in the fabric seemed to underscore the uncertainty that now lay between us. Later that evening, I decided we needed a neutral space, away from the clutter and shadows of our home. A small dinner party, I thought, might lighten the mood, or at least distract us. I invited our close friends, Sarah and Tom, hoping their presence would bring some normalcy back. The doorbell rang just as I was setting the last plate on the table. Sarah breezed in with her usual flair, a bottle of wine in hand, followed by Tom, who gave Mark a friendly nod as they entered. "Something smells amazing," Sarah exclaimed, wrapping me in a warm hug. "You always outdo yourself, girl." "Thanks," I replied, managing a smile, just trying to keep things interesting. As we gathered around the table, the initial awkwardness slowly melted away under the soft glow of the candles. Wine flowed and laughter began to fill the room. I caught Mark's eye across the table, and for a moment he smiled genuinely, tension in his eyes easing. "So, Mark," Tom began, swirling his wine, "how's the golf game going? Still terrorizing the green?" Mark chuckled. "Trying to. But you know me, more terror for myself than for anyone else." The conversation shifted effortlessly from sports to work, then to the latest series everyone was watching. I felt the weight of the afternoon's conversation receding, sinking beneath the light-hearted banter. It was during dessert, as I served the apple pie, that Sarah's tone took a nosy turn. "So, you two have been quiet lately. Everything good with you guys?" I froze for a second, pie server in hand, while Mark replied smoothly, "Just the usual busy schedules, you know how it is." Sarah, never one to miss a beat, leaned in, her voice lower. "You sure? Because if there's something going on, you know you can talk to us, right?" Mark's gaze flickered to me, a silent plea to tread lightly. I set the pie down, choosing my words carefully. "It's nothing major, just the stress of work and all. You know how it piles up." Tom nodded, taking a bite of his pie. "It does at that. But hey, if you ever need a break, we're thinking of heading up to the lake next weekend. You guys should come." The offer hung in the air, appealing and yet untimely. I was about to decline when Mark interjected. "That sounds like a great idea. We could use a little getaway." Surprised, I shot him a look. But his expression was hopeful, almost eager. Maybe it was his way of trying to bridge the gap that had formed between us, or perhaps just a distraction. "Then it's settled," Sarah exclaimed, clapping her hands delightedly. "A weekend at the lake." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of planning and more laughter. But beneath the surface cheer, my mind raced. Mark's readiness to escape, even just for a weekend, was unlike him. Was it guilt? Or simply a desire to smooth things over? After our friends left, the house returned to its quiet state, the laughter echoing off the walls, a stark reminder of the facade we'd maintained. Mark approached me in the kitchen, his hand brushing mine softly. "Hey, about the lake," he started. "I thought it might be good for us, you know." "I hope so," I replied, meeting his eyes. There was hope there, but also something else, something unreadable. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, the uncertainty returned, filling the silent spaces of our home like a thick fog. Sleep was elusive as I lay in bed, the moon casting shadows across the room, each one seeming to whisper doubts and fears. What was Mark hiding? And could weekend away really mend what might already be broken? The drive to the lake was quieter than usual. Mark seemed pensive, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, while I stared out the window, the lush greenery blurring by. The tension between us was palpable, an unspoken agreement to keep peace until we reached our temporary escape. We arrived at the lake house just before noon. The air was crisp, the sun reflecting off the water in dazzling patterns. Tom and Sarah were already there, unpacking their SUV. "Look who finally made it," Tom called out, waving us over. His cheerfulness seemed to cut through the heaviness around us. Sarah hugged me tightly. "You guys look like you need this break more than we thought," she whispered, concern flickering in her eyes. I managed a weak smile, my heart sinking. Even our friends could sense the strain. As we settled in, the men decided to go fishing, a chance to catch dinner, as Tom joked. I stayed behind with Sarah, grateful for the momentary solitude. "So spill," Sarah urged as we sat on the deck, watching the ripples on the lake. "What's really going on with you two?" I hesitated, the truth gnawing at me. "It's complicated. The other day, Mark made some joke about, well, infidelity. It didn't sit right with me." Sarah's brow furrowed. "That doesn't sound like Mark. Are you sure you're not reading too much into it?" "I don't know anymore," I admitted, my voice faltering. "Maybe I am. But it's hard to shake the feeling that something's off." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the dock. "Look," Sarah finally said, "why don't you use this weekend to really talk to him? Maybe it's all just a big misunderstanding." I nodded, knowing she was right, but the fear of what might come out of such a conversation held me back. Meanwhile, out on the lake, Mark and Tom floated in a small boat, lines cast. I could see them talking animatedly, Mark gesturing with his hands, a serious expression on his face. "Maybe they're having their own deep conversation," Sarah joked lightly, trying to lift the mood. "Maybe," I replied, though part of me dreaded what Mark might be sharing. The afternoon slipped into evening, and the guys returned with a couple of fish enough for dinner. Tom was in high spirits, boasting about his catch, while Mark seemed quieter, more reflective. As dinner progressed, the conversation turned light, filled with stories of past adventures at the lake. Yet, I couldn't shake the anxiety tightening in my chest. After cleaning up, we gathered around the fire pit, the night sky sprawling above us, stars twinkling in their silent beauty. "Isn't this perfect?" Tom said, passing around a bottle of whiskey. "It is," Mark agreed, his voice softer now. He caught my eye across the fire, something like remorse flickering in his gaze. As the fire crackled, the warmth of the whiskey loosened my resolve. "Mark," I started, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk. About us." He nodded, his face serious. "I know. I've been thinking, and I—" But before he could continue, a sudden commotion on the other side of the lake caught our attention. Lights flashed, and distant shouts broke the peaceful night air. "What in the world?" Tom muttered, standing up to get a better look. As the disturbance across the lake grew louder, our own issues momentarily forgotten, we watched in confusion and concern. What was unfolding over there? And more importantly, what was about to unfold between us? The commotion across the lake gradually subsided, but the disturbance it had created lingered in the air, mirroring the turmoil between Mark and me. We returned to our seats, the fire now a mere flicker against the encroaching darkness. "Sorry," Mark finally said, breaking the uneasy silence. "You were saying?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the conversation I had dreaded yet desperately needed. "I need to know, Mark. Is there someone else?" He hesitated, his eyes avoiding mine. The weight of the moment felt suffocating, every second stretched to its limit. "No," he finally said, his voice firm. "There's no one else. The joke was stupid, I know. But it was just that, a joke." I wanted to believe him, to let his words wash away the doubts that had poisoned our relationship. But something held me back. "Why bring it up then?" I pressed, needing to understand. He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I've been feeling insecure, I guess. With all the hours you've been working, I wondered if I was enough." His admission struck me, a reflection of my own insecurities. How had we gotten so lost in our own fears that we couldn't see each other's pain? Just then, Sarah approached us, her face illuminated by her phone screen. "Hey, you guys might want to see this," she said, handing the phone to Mark. His expression shifted as he read, and then, handing it back to her, he turned to me with an urgency I hadn't seen before. "It's about Jerry, the guy from the joke. He's been arrested, embezzlement and other charges. They found out when his so-called lover turned him in." The pieces clicked into place, a mosaic of misplaced trust and misunderstood intentions. The joke wasn't just a joke. It was a projection of Mark's own fears, amplified by the reality of his friend's downfall. "Mark, I'm so sorry," I said, reaching for his hand. "I didn't realize how much this was affecting you." He squeezed my hand, relief evident in his eyes. I should have been more open about how I was feeling. I let my fears get the better of me. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about everything we had bottled up inside. The fire had died down to glowing embers by the time we decided to head back inside. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt like it was finally closing. The misunderstandings that had once seemed insurmountable now appeared surmountable, bridged by our renewed commitment to honesty and understanding. As dawn broke over the lake, casting a soft glow into our room, Mark wrapped an arm around me. "Let's never let it get that bad again," he murmured. "I agree," I replied, snuggling closer. The fear of betrayal had nearly broken us, but in the end, it was our own insecurities that had been the real threat. The weekend at the lake had not only provided a respite from our routines, but had also cleared the fog of doubt and misunderstanding. We had come to the lake burdened by secrets and fears, but we were leaving with a promise to mend and grow together. As we packed up to leave, the lake calm and the air clear, I felt a sense of renewal. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we were better equipped to face them together, no longer prisoners of our own insecurities, but partners strengthened by honesty and love.